And good morning to you, Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. My name is Sheldon Scott, and I will be hosting this morning's press conference. And with me this morning, we have former Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, political leader of the New National Party and leader of His Majesty's opposition. And as promised, he will continue to have these engagements with the media and the nation, speaking on varying and various issues of national importance. So at this time, I'd like to turn over to Dr. Mitchell, who will be having his opening statements in relation to various issues.
Thank you, Sheldon, and of course, good morning. Thank you, Sheldon, and good morning to your audience throughout the length and breadth of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and the wider community as a whole. As I promised the last time, I was going to make this event a monthly exercise, and therefore this is the second one after such a commitment was made. In beginning our program this morning, the issue I first want to talk about, to mention, is the present economic state of our country. What we are noticing throughout, and we get in reports, and we ourselves as we go around as party members and people of interest, people who clearly understand what is taking place in the country, that there is a serious state of economic despair at all levels in the society. And what is frightening to most people that they do not see the government side appearing to understand the significant aspect of this situation in the country as a whole. So all sectors, you have particularly the poor and the vulnerable, although we're not supposed to talk about the poor and the vulnerable, because this government says the NNP love to talk about poor and vulnerable because we like to keep people poor. You know, all the road work and things that we do is about keeping people poor. So do nothing for them. Let them suffer. That is the context in which the present government operates. So I wonder what is the main concept of one being in government. I thought is in being in government, you pick policies to enhance all aspects of life in the country, so that everybody in all levels in the society would feel there is opportunity for them to improve. But government must always have a focus on the poor and vulnerable. If you don't do that, then you're failing in your responsibility in government. In Great America, there are poor people, and you hear the Democratic administration and other administration talking about initiatives to help to the poor and vulnerable in specific areas of policies of government. So you have the lack of road work in the country, the mass of people at different sectors. What we provide this support to ensure not only we clean our streets, but also provide some basic help for the people that need them the most. The farmers, the fishermen are balling out in the country. They're having difficulties providing the support to their families. The fishermen, in many cases, have catches that they get, but are unable to sell them. In some cases, they have to drop their price because the lack of sales. The market vendors are complaining because they have to sit in the hot sun all day, literally so, and are unable to be able to make a few dollars to survive. I recall that when we were in government, we helped trying to help the market vendors. We placed a number of them at the stadium with coverage so that in the period of the hot sun that they will do their business and so on, and most of them became comfortable. This government came into office, and for whatever reason they just dismantle these shelters for these poor people, which is unconscionable in every single respect. So the small businesses in the country are crying out. There's a lack of business in the country as a whole. the busmen, the taxi men are bawling. And most of all, the cost of living. Every day you go to the supermarkets at all levels, at the shops around the country, the prices are going up without, you can't understand what is taking place in the country. And one cannot really blame the shopkeepers and the supermarkets, because they, of course, are having to deal with the prices to buy the goods, to sell, to make a profit. So the whole thing is that there seems to be no order, no attempt to deal with these present high increases in a time that the poor and vulnerable, as I mentioned before, are having great difficulty surviving. So these are all major problems. And what is frightening is that this government continues to almost be a fetting government. Every time you turn on any aspects of what they're doing, you're seeing a fete here, a gala here, a party here, a celebration here, and a fete here. I recall when we were in government, and there was a period where things were tough, and so on, and that happens intermittently in government. We cut back on all entertainment activities because we feel that the monies that we're spending on parties and, of course, social activity among ourselves should be spent on helping the poor and vulnerable people in the society. So I find it the complete opposite with this government. While people are suffering, these members of government and ministers are having fun. The last parliament session, I understand, we had about 3 caterers with all sorts of things, wine and beer and alcohol and so on, while people are seeing trouble outside there. I am not going to be afraid to speak about that. They have to defend these things because it is not, in my view, it's unconscionable. So while poor people are suffering, while you're taking out $150 from a poor person who can hardly survive, a poor lady who maybe, later years, a poor man in the later years of life, you yourself criticized and said the World Bank said that we should be raising this thing to $650 and not $450. You said that when you were campaigning. You come into government, and what you've done, you cut back. you cut back the $450 and take out $150 from the same people that you said that the World Bank claimed were not being given sufficiently. And at the same time you're doing this, you raise the salary of ministers by $2,000. So it seems like this government attitude is that this thing is about us. We come into government, NNP was having fun, that's what they thought. And this is our time, so to speak. And strange enough, one of those persons in government said to me recently, Doc, you have to keep quiet. This is our time now. You had enough time. Could you imagine? This is being said by someone who's guiding policies in this government. I'm not going to call a name. The person who said it to me couldn't afford to tell the nation that it was them who said it, and so on. I have so many other issues that I would like to mention. The housing issue and of course, the social services issues in the country that are supposed to be meant to help the poor and vulnerable. I hope that later on we will expand on those issues because the housing situation is on one of that proposal to deal with the housing that is creating massive problems in the country. It seems like every time there's an issue that the poor people should benefit, this government has decided to put pressure on the poor people of the country. The oil and gas issue is another one. Brother Gregory Bowen spoke at length recently about all details of it, and it's frightening that some people, even the leader of the country, would go and would pen part of the presentation, the Governor General's throne speech, to say that they can't find information on the oil and gas. And he's in government for almost 18 months. And he can't find anything on oil and gas when this thing is all over the place, which is clearly another lie again, because clearly this, and Gregory has given, have shown the nation and told him, the Prime Minister where he can, he told him persons who he can speak to, ministries that he can go to and find information. I understand when I made the statement afterwards that it's another lie. He said he's calling on me to tell him where it is. I'll find it. If he wanted to know where it is, he should have left NMP in government. NMP would have found it and continued to do what we had to do, and not campaign to be in government and today you're complaining about what you did not find. But there we know the history of this government, the lies that have been consistently told at the top level of government. You remember the Polish ambassador? We had this cabinet conclusion that the NNP would literally stole $150,000, $140,000, sorry, you couldn't find it. And they have the cabinet conclusion for 290 when in fact there was no such cabinet conclusion. And up to now, we're calling for the cabinet conclusion. And up to now, we can't get it. So you heard the contract work is illegal. You remember that famous statement before they got into office? When they get into office, they have the expanding contracts and come with all kinds of fancy legalistic jargon and sidestepping issues to fool people and believe that they can get away with it. The issue of free education, another nonsense again, when in fact the NNP government was providing tuition for those who cannot afford, and providing books allowance, free books for those persons who can't afford, providing transportation allowance, uniform allowance. NNP had broadened this thing. It's my own personal view, and I've said it. If the country has enough money to give everybody everything free, free books, free tuition, free transportation, and I say, and we have oil money running, I say give everybody. But in a time that you're claiming that things that you have difficulty and shortages and you have to cut back on poor people seed program and so on. In a time that you have this, you tell him you're giving free tuition to everybody, and that's it. And you're not talking about the transportation allowance, you're not talking about uniform allowance, you're not talking about providing additional support to the poor people so they can buy some food and so on. So what is that? What is that meant to be? Because to me, if people who can afford, and they have their kids going to school, and they can afford, if I have a son going to school, I don't need free tuition. Take that money of free tuition you give me and people like me, and give transportation allowance, uniform allowance to the poor people of the country. This is what, because the emphasis, as I mentioned, and I have to go back to that over and over, government is, the people getting into government would have policies and programs to advance the development of the country for all sectors, programs and so on. But the government, every government must have a focus, a specific focus on dealing with the poor and vulnerable. And this is another focus we're talking about. Another lie again about the 2 planes. We're going to buy 2 planes and so on. We hear nothing about that. We're going to build a highway from St. George's to Satez, Now we're hearing about a new hospital and so on. Every day is another fancy idea that comes without thought. Like when you're in cricket and you don't know how to play the ball, you just fire back, you whoop. You're whooping and whooping. If you connect, you connect. If you don't connect, well, to hell with this. That is the attitude of this government. You have hospital services now. Health has always been an issue, no matter which government is in office. There's been problems. There's always a concern that we can provide more help, more this, more this. Today, it is worse than it has ever been. You have a basic medication for blood pressure and basic sugar and other basic problems that people face. There are shortages there. The staff nurses are complaining about the morale of the hospital. The doctors are complaining. And you have complaints all over the place. They cannot see the level of ministerial direction is extremely poor. And so on. You have these problems. lack of basic support. But you're talking about, you can't even deal with the fundamental service in the present hospital. You're talking about a big fancy, as if hospital service is about a new big building for millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. That's not hospital. I went to Cuba, and when the Fidel Castro was there, and they took me around Cuba, and the polyclinics around the country, what little small sectors of buildings, but they had all the equipment, they had all the medication to satisfy the needs of the people. So hospital services the building is secondary. It has to be an appropriate building. But the main thing is the equipment, the services, the staffing, the medication. That's what hospital service is about. So I don't know what kind of, what we've been told. Also, I want to just mention, I heard on the throne speech about all plans, to modernize the public service and modernize the police service. Both of these institutions are being destroyed because there is no system, all the investment that took place before, where we had modernization of the public service, the British government, the British Development Division, the US aid on the European Union, helped millions of dollars were spent in the NDC government in 1995. 1990 to 1995, they invested in modernization of public service, and they started the whole question of a Department of Public Administration to have to modernize the public service, to put systems in place to make people are promoted based on performance, to make sure that when you have to take decisions of lifting services, that certain persons with certain skills, these were put in place by the former NDC government, and we came into government. In fact, we were in opposition, and the NDC government then did ask the staffing, the public service, to talk to the opposition in case there's government change, to ensure that they certainly would be would support the process, the views on the modernization of the public service. We were involved, many members of the opposition, so when we came into government, we followed up, and millions were spent. Today, the new NDC government come into office, and they are dismantling everything. They're promoting people overnight, taking one person from one stage in the public service, make them a permanent secretary, make them cabinet secretary overnight, with no policy, no promotion judgment or criteria. And therefore, it demoralizes the public services as a whole. Because I know many public servants who never really supported the NNP government and were high in expectation of this present government. Today, I know some of them are demoralized. So, because they cannot understand the persons they voted for are treating the institution that they claim they love in the way they are doing. And I just mentioned briefly, before I stop here and give the audience a chance to ask the question and for Sheldon to lead this exercise going forward. Too much wastage in the government public service. Ministers are traveling, staff members are traveling, everybody doing their own thing. There are no controls of ministers, because when you can find a minister being asked to act as prime minister, and he's out of the island, the prime minister doesn't even know, that tells you the state of governance of this country. And when you tell you another person has to be named acting prime minister, that could never happen under Keith Mitchell-led government over the years. You cannot, as a minister, leave the country without the knowledge of the prime minister and without the knowledge of his cabinet members, because that's a fundamental responsibility of a cabinet member. So one cannot blame the members. What is taking place in the country today within government and the lack of government has a lot to do with leadership and the lack of it. I am almost sympathetic to the young members of this government in the sense that they need guidance, they need support, they need advice, and what they're getting is clearly do as you want. Do as you want is like a playground, everybody. Then the next thing you hear, we spending money on $7.5 million for independence celebration. Fet. The continuation of party. That is the atmosphere while people are suffering outside there. And they said that's not for FET. Well, I'm waiting to see what is coming from this thing. And I know there are a lot of issues that are concerning us. The security of this country is a concern of many, many people, because I know the level of violence taking place in this country and the amount of murders that we are seeing is frightening. And I mean, we talk about it. People are concerned. People who come to Grenada and say it's one of the safest places are expressing concern. And I know the issue of even the question of John T.'s death. I mean, I heard this story about somebody just walking and say they commit a murder, and somebody saying that they commit a murder. I don't know anybody that just walk in and say, I commit a murder. You know, I mean, who are you fooling with this foolishness? I have no confidence, absolutely no confidence, and this is why I made a call that the leadership of the country must call for regional or international support. And I can't believe that should be turned down, because confidence is what you want to build. Because what you're doing now on the claim of solving some problems and arresting somebody, it's nonsense. I don't believe it, that they're credible. So the people wouldn't believe they're credible. So you need to justify what you're doing by setting up a transparent system where people can believe whatever decision comes, that is in fact believable. Right now, it's not believable. So I make a call again, bring in support from the British government or the US government or whoever international institutions exist to do serious investigation and to arrest those who commit those crimes. I rest my case at this point in time, and I know people will be anxious too. And Sheldon, I know you might want to raise a few issues yourself going forward, because you've been raising a lot of them outside of that or being here today.
All right, and we'd like to thank you so very much for that extensive, quite a few issues that you've raised, Dr. Mitchell. The economy of Grenada, the state of affairs when it comes to several of our institutions in Grenada. And I know my media friends, they will now have the opportunity to ask your questions. And the way we're going to go about this is that we're going to take questions from you. One, in the first round, we're going to have several rounds. We're going to take the first questions. And if you have a follow-up, based on the response, we'll allow you a follow-up. And then we'll move on to the next person. So I am waiting to see which of you is going to be the first to ask your question this morning. So I have not seen a hand yet. I'm not sure if we have anybody that is ready with a question as yet. But Dr. Mitchell, first of all, we've heard on the issue of oil and gas, we've been hearing several statements being made by the present administration in relation to oil and gas and not being able to find information and that sort of thing. On leaving office, what was the state in relation to oil and gas? What was the situation in relation to oil and gas?
Well, we have made several pronouncements, public pronouncements, about this issue. And former Minister Gregory Boyne, who was the Minister of Energy and who, of course, had the technical expertise as an engineer going forward, had in fact give thorough explanation and almost a ball report on the issue of oil and gas. And in fact, government, as he said recently, only recently called on him for information that he had, and he gave it, and he never made a public statement. But since they're now saying that they have found no information, then he has to expose what is happening. We've talked about it. We said there was serious investment by the group that was involved, GPG. There was serious investment involved. And they were able to reach the point of drilling for particular well and the identification of a serious amount of gas and some oil in terms of that first investment. But they need to invest a lot more in doing more wells to make it commercially viable. But that was well known. The data is there. All the seismic studies, even long before we came into office, the NDC government of the previous years sent a delegation down to Trinidad to work with the Trinidad government on this particular issue. So these are not, there was no doubt, and we never told no lie. I mean, the data is there. So I can't understand why would you want to tell a lie like this. And Minister Bowen exposed the lie. If you tell, and I know you've been playing clips of what Mr. Bowen said, he went through details and in fact said where you could find what. They're in government for almost 18 months. You have the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, documents were signed and so on. That was not a fly-by-night issue. You have officers, I think he mentioned the officer who was in charge, the technical person, who, what's his name again?
Mr. Ogis.
Mr. Ogis. He's there. Was a public servant, and he was close to the information, all the information I'm talking about. He was there, so if he has no reason to lie for this government, the government then. So you could get information if you're serious. Do not want to just malign people, always trying to character assassinate people to make yourself look good at the expense of others, instead of governing the country and improving the lives of people, not just enjoying yourself, joyriding all over the world and enjoying yourself in gala functions all over the world while people are suffering in this country. People are suffering, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen of the government. People are suffering. Deal with other people's problems. Help the poor. Help the vulnerable. Stop playing with these people's lives. Do what you have to do to build this country. That is what you have to do, and that's what we're calling on them again this morning to do.
All right, I believe we have a question from Linda Straker. Linda Straker, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, good morning. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. Proceed with your question, please, Linda.
Thank you, and good morning to the Leader of the Opposition. I have quite a bit of questions that I need to ask. A lot of it might be centered around clarity as well as education to the public. Now, my first question has to do with the recent debt bulletin from the government stated that at the end of June, non-bank financial institutions were the leading holders of domestic debt, which held at 43% of domestic portfolio. Can Dr. Mitchell, as a former finance minister and prime minister, explain to me and the public what is classified as non-bank financial institution, and what is his, is he concerned that domestic debt is as high as 43.0%, while external debt is 100 almost. Okay, I'll end the question there. Just explain what is non-bank financial.
Well, it's like if you have maybe companies that you owe, or institutions or persons or a group that you owe resources to, and there could be a wide range of persons that are not banks providing banking services. So it's a broad range. I don't know the detail of those loans that they're talking about. I have not seen the details, but that is a general term used, non-banking institutions and so on. It sounds high. 43% seems a bit high, because what it means most likely, therefore, it would be commercial type activities, and therefore that might be a little worrying. And in fact, the more you owe people in the country and you're not paying for services as you should, then of course you're affecting economic activity and the country as a whole. So I have not seen the report, and Linda specifically, but I'm giving my general comment as I know it based on my experience as being in the Ministry of Finance, and of course working on financial matters as a whole. So that is how I see it. The other part of your question, I try to remember. What was it again?
No, I was just going to do a comparison with Yeah, we're just doing a comparison with domestic, with external debt.
Well,
With
external debt
domestic,
would be if you owe, say, like you owe World Bank institution or something, or you owe companies outside of the country for services or resources that they give you. Hopefully, in our time, we only used to accept, because of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, only loans that we get that of a soft financial basis. For example, we generally went to the soft window of the World Bank. That's IDA. And that IDA used to be what you call 0.75% interest rate, 10 years grace, and 40 years to repay. So they're almost like grant, but it's still part of the debt unless it's forgiven. So you would have to, the IMF and other institutions might provide support, the Caribbean Development Bank. Remember, when we had COVID-19, we borrowed a substantial sum from the soft window through IDA, and working with the Caribbean Development Bank to provide soft loans to help businesses recover from these 2 years of COVID-19. And that we thought was necessary, and that's why our debt to GDP ratio went up a little bit, comparatively speaking, for what we had before, because we felt it was necessary to spur economic activity and to help people to recover. But we never took money, Linda, from the Grenada Development Bank and gave a minister over $2 million. We say that's unacceptable. I mean, I've never heard in my entire period history of being in government, and that is over 40 years, almost 40 years, where government of the day is helping giving ministers of government, in one case 1.7 million, another case over $2 million, and other support services to ministers. If ministers already drawing reasonable salary, people are catching the nene out there. It's the monies that the GDPs help to use to help small businesses, not to give millions of dollars to any one individual, particularly if they're in government. I think this is unconscionable. And to me, I find it strange that you don't hear much comment in the streets. You don't hear certain persons who had loud voices when the NNP was in government, when we did nothing like this. You'd hear calls to resign, calls for demonstration, I'm not saying you should, but where are the voices? Where are the conscience of this nation? Where are those persons who are so active? And I find I hadn't hearing much from the trade union these days. With all the firing and victimization of workers, the destruction of the livelihood of people. We never did this, but we had so much confrontation. But it's amazing. Some voices seem to be shut now. I don't know what's the reason. But I will call it out, because when I was in government, I was called out for things that some case blamed for things I had nothing to do with. So I'm saying this is our country. It doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Keith Mitchell and NNP, whether it's NNP and whoever leader is involved, whether it's NDC and whoever is involved. When something is not right, we must call it out. It shouldn't. One thing is good today because it's one government in office, but it's bad today with another government in office. That can't be. Bad is bad, good is good, and it should be consistent throughout.
my follow-up question is,
Yes.
according to the same bulletin, not the bulletin, the monthly fiscal report,
Yes.
for the month of July, when compared to January to July of 2022 and 2023, government received less than expected grant, a serious reduction in grant. What's your view on this, and what you think could be responsible for government receiving less than expected grant? As a matter of fact, for that period, last year there was 157 million, and for the period this year it's 33.3 million. What's your view on what could have caused and responsible?
Linda, there could be a number of explanations, but I would suggest a few. Clearly, the NNP had followed a serious fiscal model that were consistent with what is expected for countries managing their own affairs properly. When you do that, the international community and friendly institutions would come and provide the necessary support to you. But if you are mismanaging your economy and you're doing things as if, well, the money is no problem and you can do what you want, you're traveling freely, you're spending what you want, you're doing anything you wish, and they seem to think you have a lot, there is no need to give you anything specifically. So I think the management style of the government, the fiscal management of the country can be, because as I say, I don't know the specific details, but I was just been giving you an idea what I believe could have affected this. And of course, the image of the government. We had serious international connections with the international community. We were able to raise millions and millions of dollars from climate change, the GCF and other institutions internationally because of our involvement. That's why we were able to get the appointment of Simon Stigl in such key positions in the UN organization, because we were respected regionally and internationally. I don't know what's happening in this government at this time and what is taking place, but it's clear that it seems to me the government main source of getting grant is the passport issue, the CBI, where I understand over 90% of the applicants are Russians in a time that you have the serious problem with Russia and the Western and the European countries, and including America. And that again could be a serious issue. It will affect our image regionally and internationally. All these are factors. I'm not suggesting, as I said, I don't know the details, but I'm only suggesting what could be factors responsible for what is taking place in this country and the fact that the government doesn't seem to be able to get the support that the former government used to get.
Okay, and I believe we've got a question by Miss Nancy McGuire, so we'll move over to Miss Nancy McGuire. Good morning to you, Nancy. Are you hearing me clearly?
Good morning, and good morning to Dr. Mitchell and everybody.
Morning.
I have a question about, I'm seeking an explanation, because when they talked about regularization of public officers, and they've done all this research and studied into who was hired how, and they were saying that we have different categories and different contracts and a whole mode of operational contracts, however you want to say it. But I wanted to tell us how we had to have the structural adjustment program in the first place. And that is where we started to improvise on the way people were hired, because of what the international donors were telling us we had to do, because of what the NNP had inherited financially. Thank you, sir.
Nancy, I think let's go back to the history. It's well known that when this government we had, after the fall of the revolution in 1983, it's well known that the revolution had a public sector type management of the entire country. In other words, everything was being done through the state, so to speak. That resulted in a bloated public service, and that you had much more people in the public service than the country could have supported over the years, because everything the PRG done was public sector. The hiring side, everybody became a public servant. The government then in 1984, I was part of the government, I was of course clearly not just a minister of government, went to a structural adjustment program and retrenchment program and took a lot of political licks, because the international community insisted that unless we reduce the size of the service, they got studies done, and the USAID and the British government and the European governments and all were involved and so on. And the studies were done. I hear they're trying to look at the appropriate size of the public service. That was done years ago. And so this was done to help to provide the necessary reduction in the government monthly revenue for recurrent expenditure on salaries specifically so. The government in 1990 to 95, that was the NDC government led by Nicholas Brafitt and George Brezan and so on. They continued that exercise after the NNP went out of government in 1990 and continued with an additional initiative of public sector modernization, which I mentioned a short while ago. This was not an NNP thing. And they continued it and involved us in opposition. So when we came into government in 95, we continued that exercise. We continued for the years onwards until 2008. The NDC government came in, and to some extent, I would say they kept that formula. There was some tinkling with some hiring here and personnel in the service here and there, but generally speaking, they were not inconsistent with the general policy over the years. It is only this government that seemed to forget that all this work was done and that their own NDC government were a key factor in where we are today with respect to the public service management system. And therefore, they're proceeding to dismantle all the things. And I mentioned, remember the first budget presentation that I made in reply to the budget, when they've been one stroke of the pen, they brought in over almost 200 new persons on the public service payroll. And don't think the international community is not hearing this. In a time when you should be managing the public service, you should be increasing services to the country and not necessarily bloating the public service. Here were you doing the complete opposite. And it's because I believe they lacked that maturity and they lacked that understanding of the impact this thing would have on their own management of the country and the ability to be able to provide basic services and to improve the livelihood of the people of a whole. So I think this is something that where we had gone through so much. So I don't know why this government feels that they have to overturn almost everything that was there, and claiming, as the Prime Minister said, nothing was done in the country since 1983. What a sad statement. It's so sad to hear someone make a statement like this. It's frightening. And so Nancy, that's where we are right now.
Any follow-up question, Ms. McGuire?
Yes, I wanted to just turn to the throne speech for a minute and just get your general feelings about whether you thought it was on the political side as opposed to, a speech from His Majesty.
No, well, Nancy, first of all, Her Majesty, the Governor General, Her Majesty's representative, the Governor General, His Majesty, sorry. I have to get used to this. The Governor General is the King's representative here. Now, in England, the King's throne speech is written by the government. So it's a government speech, but the King reads it. He may or may not have some initiative or input based on his relationship with the Prime Minister or whoever in government, helping with the development of that speech. Similarly here. But the speech that the Governor General reads is the speech of the government. She may have an input. When we were in government, I could say that now and then the Governor General would offer an advice on certain lines in the speech that we give her. And sometimes we accept or we give explanation why it is necessary to keep it. But that's a role of government and the role of the responsibility of the Governor General. So I cannot blame the Governor General or imply that what she read was not necessarily the best possible speech. As far as she's concerned, this is the speech of the government of the day. As far as the speech is concerned, there were lots of words. Anyone could write a nice document and talk and talk. This government is famous for talking and sand dancing with words. You know, like when we are in the courts and we using language to confuse everybody. We can write things, but we never concern ourselves with implementing what we say. And this government has a history of making lots of promises, saying all kinds of things. They're promising to build new hospital, promising to build a road to Sates, from St. George's to Sates. They're promising to build to a cultural center every part of the country, every place they go, to do a little culture thing. We're going to build a cultural center here. Promising to build a road. Promising to build. This government makes statements, but check their record to see what they have delivered during almost 16 months or 17 months of government so far. So I expect nothing else from this government. More talk, more let down from the population standpoint, and the fact that more words and more words. That's what I see, and I think they're becoming very famous of telling things that are not truthful, and later on have to be able to almost side dance in explaining why things are not done.
Dr. Mitchell, before we move to another question from another member of the media, yesterday we heard from the Housing Authority of Grenada in relation to the housing units, the Chinese built and granted, and I know why I'm using those specific words, Chinese built and granted housing units that were given to the people of Grenada. We heard a situation where individuals now have to pay upfront, go to a financial institution and pay upfront. You were the Prime Minister who secured these houses, and those that should be coming, you were the Prime Minister that secured these for Grenada. What say you in relation to the present situation?
The first thing I want to point out, this government has a tendency to behave as if the previous government had no right to be in government. When the previous government had an absolute majority in Parliament, voted by the people of the country in several years, several times. And therefore, everything we did, they tried to undo it, even when it is in the best interest of the country, because we had no right. Keith Mitchell and the NNP were so wicked and bad, they have no right to making any decision, so we're going to change everything, and so on. After Ivan struck this country, and we had engagement with the Chinese government, myself and the former foreign minister of Grenada, my dear beloved friend Elvin Nimrod, deceased, went to China officially. And we told them or asked, in addition to the financial aid and other things that were given to the country, they asked for the priorities of the government. We named the destruction of the stadium as a serious priority because we wanted a stadium where the young people can use their skills in athletics and football and, of course, cricket. So that was one. But also a top priority was providing housing for the people in the country. But we specifically said to the Chinese, we wanted the houses for the poor, more for the poor and vulnerable. So we wanted thousands of houses for the poor and vulnerable. It was meant for people who do not normally would qualify to go to a bank, right? So we specified, and they did, it was a gift, grant. We didn't invest any serious money from the Chinese government, built this, agreed to the arrangement, and agreed to 2,000 houses for the people. And it was meant to be given to the poor people of this country who do not necessarily will be able to qualify to go to a bank. So no matter all the things you're hearing, or they're going to get guarantees on, this is nonsense. The fact is, the minute you talk about a one-bedroom house for $50-something thousand, and another bedroom house, two-bedroom for $70-something thousand, you are in fact ruling out a lot of the poor people who should be getting these houses. I would not say totally free, but with minimum amount of investment. So that if you ask somebody to maybe to pay a 200 or some case less than that, and some case a little more a month, but these houses were for them. And now you're taking it as if it's your government. your responsibility to change the criteria, change the modus operandi of this, of the service of those houses, and to charge people a pile of money to do what? For more travels, for more fete, for people to take their spouses and their boyfriends and girlfriends to all parts of the world at the expense of the taxpayers? Is that what it's for? Is that what the money for the poor people is all about? I'm frightened. The houses must be given to the people who need it the most. And I'm not saying you're going to be perfect. I don't believe the NNP would have been perfect in the delivery of all who get there. I'm sure in some cases, some people that should not qualify may have qualified. But the mass of the people that should get those houses are the poor and vulnerable. And I don't understand how you can expect a poor person to find $55,000. I don't care who is guaranteeing. The fact is, they must pay this thing over every single month. And these people, in many cases, not working. So where are they getting the resources to do so? Go back to what was promised. You were not involved in acquiring these houses. It was a previous government, and the policy was give it to the poor and vulnerable. And instead of that, you want to do your own thing. First of all, letters were given to the people of Karakou and some other places in the country, to people. They want to withdraw those letters as if they don't seem to realize. I say to the people of Karakou and anyone who receive a letter, I say, sue the government. And I'm guaranteeing you that if you have a letter from a previous government saying that you have a house under certain conditions, no government afterwards can come and take it from you and say they're changing the condition. If you go to court, and I'm suggesting some lawyer or lawyers should be involved in taking a case to deal with this government and going against a basic decisions and agreement that was made already. These houses are for these people. So unless there is a mistake or some error in a particular areas or person based on the criteria, as long as that is not done, then these people have a right to receive those houses. And I'm suggesting people who receive letters from the previous government for houses under certain condition should not just lie down and take it. This government is behaving like if we're in a dictatorship, but if it's a revolution and they can do what they want. They cannot do what they want. They have to understand this. This is the people's government. This is the people's resources. That's not NDC resources. It is not Dick Mitchell resources. It is not Keith Mitchell resources. This is the people's resources, and they must respect that.
Dr. Mitchell, one follow-up in relation to that particular issue. Even if the folks are going to have to find finances to get these houses, and so what approach should the government have taken instead of sending them to the financial institutions as they have done?
My friend, I would suggest that whatever approach they're taking, to me, as long as the people have to go to a financial institution, most people will not qualify based on the resources they have, that they do not have. And to me, it's frightening, because anytime you go to a bank, you have to find lawyer fees, you have to find certain facilities, all kinds of things are involved. The fact is, a lot of people would be very reluctant, and those who need it the most. In fact, what you would find out, a lot of people who really do not need the houses and should not normally qualify will be the people benefiting from those houses. And those whom we negotiated for the houses from the Chinese for would be the ones, generally speaking, I'm not saying in all cases, that may not qualify and may not get those houses. So I'm not going to go on who should go to where and what institution. The fact is, these houses are the people's houses. This is not NDC houses. These are the people's houses. And it was meant to give to the poor and vulnerable. And there were already criteria laid down by the previous government about how these houses should be given and to whom and under what condition. And I'm saying the government should abide by the previous understanding of the decisions. And that's the way we should take it. I cannot be talking about going to GDB and going to NIS and going to this and going to that. I don't know, honestly. I think it's attempt by the government to raise money and to take it from the poor and vulnerable as they custom doing, and to have their joyride in enjoying themselves and having more galas, more fete, more party, $7.5 million for 50th celebration. You're going to see parties for so parties and more parties, spending money and enjoying yourselves while the people are suffering in the country as a whole. They should take a walk around the country, you know. These government ministers and people making decisions in government, go into the country and pass around the blocks, walk around, pass in the shops that where people used to congregate and having fun and relaxing and enjoying themselves on a weekend, on other days in the evening, and see how empty these places are. The regular places where people lime and you see people getting together for social activities, that's gone. Go out in the country. I remember in Parliament one time somebody's asking, how could we know that the economy is in bad shape? Well, I had to laugh because they didn't write a paper on the economy. You don't have to rely on some intellectual document written by somebody sitting in an ivory tower and so on. The average man is his own economist because he goes out there and he feels it. He knows when he has money to take care of his kids. He knows when he has money to do basic things. He knows when he has money to buy food. And he knows when he doesn't have. That's the economy. That's his economics. He doesn't need me to tell him that things are bad or good. He feels it. And the government must understand it's not your data coming from some document that you make up or you try to give impression that is nice. It is what the people feeling outside. And I'm telling them, the people are hurting, they're hurting, and they're hurting.
All right. We'd like to take a question. Linda, I see your hand has been up quite a while. Linda Straker, we'll take your question at this time.
Thank you. I didn't realize I didn't lower my hand, but thanks. My question is moving a bit away from the economy. What is Dr. Mitchell's view on the decision to declare October 19th a holiday? And what is his view on twinning it this year with the 58th Independence celebration?
First of all, let me think. I think it's a very controversial decision. I think some people may be happy and some people will not be happy. First of all, I don't think it should be twinned with the independence celebration. I think they should be two separate events. And whatever the views, you can solicit people's views on the possibility of October 19. I do not necessarily think that initiative was necessarily a smart one. But I think it's something I believe the people should be much more involved. I think they should have listened to comments from people because October 19 is a tough day for a lot of people in this country. Some people would be happy to have to revisit it. Some people are going to go through another set of trauma and difficulties, and I don't think the government is assessing the situation as well as they should. I would not have taken the initiative to do so at this time without a tremendous level of consultation throughout the length and breadth of the country, because I think might be raising up a lot of eyesores that can be very tough for a lot of people in this country. I see people break down and still crying about their loved ones that have been lost on that fateful day. I'm not sure that some of these people are necessarily would be very happy having to revisit this at this particular time. And that's up in the air, and I don't think it's necessarily the best thing. but the government has chosen this for whatever reason. What I do, I will wait to see what marriage they're coming with independence and October 19th. That would be the most interesting one, because I have my fears that it's intended to make this a political event, to score some cheap political points, which they believe that because of based on their own understanding of where the mood of the country is. But I'm not sure that they're reading this country well. So let's see what happens going forward.
My follow-up question also is, on the 22nd of September, the government gazette had a special notice in it. And among the notice was the revoking of 89 diplomats who appear to have been appointed during your time. Have you seen that gazette and gone through the list?
I heard about it, but I have not seen it. But it seems like what you're saying is factual.
It is factual because it was gazette.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
From the best of your recollection, how much persons, when initially we would have heard about the Polish ambassador thingy, one of the things that I learned was that there was a technical fund that the people who would have gotten such appointment would have to pay a certain amount of money. To the best of your memory, can you recall how much persons received such appointments?
Well, no, I wouldn't be able to tell you the total. So if you said 89, but some was done before we came into government, some was done by previous NDC government. Some people had ambassadorial or ambassador at large activity through governments before us, whether it was NDC or previous NNP government before we came in. So, but we came up with a policy that we, in looking at having representation or services in different parts of the world, we sought to have people with knowledge, people with credibility, people with resources who would be able to advance the development of the country. So in addition to paying 150,000 US to the technical fund, they had to agree to certain proposals. Some would agree to help education, some would agree to help healthcare, that providing equipment and services for our health system. Some would have to agree to provide scholarships to education and services. They're wide range based on the person's background and connection in their own cities. That was the agreement. But before we issue any such letter of appointment, the security services of the country, FIU, the regional security apparatus, all have to check, or the international community security system, check those persons out and to ensure that they are in fact bona fide and, of course, persons with credibility and good background that to be appointed. In other words, they could have all the money. They could have all the understanding of what they would help us with. They could have the money to put the 150,000 in the technical fund. And by the way, the technical fund is what it says it would when you wanted to provide serious technical services in the country, and the government cannot pay the salaries or the kind of fees that these persons require, but we need them, we use the technical fund. And I want to say this, while they have taken, as you said, they have nullified all these appointments. We left almost $7 million in the technical fund. I don't know what has happened to it. They should have been returning those money to those people. See, if you did not like the proposal and if you felt that the person should not be appointed, then I don't know why you should be keeping the money that they gave. And so I know I have a distinct feeling that if these people decide to take this government to court for revoking the appointment, they might have a case. I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me common sense will tell me that if I have an agreement with a legitimate government authority and another government came in, he has to honor, unless there is some illegality or some issues of security in as far as that agreement is concerned. That is my understanding, but again, as I said, I'm not a lawyer. I'm only making a statement based on how I feel about these things.
Just for some further clarity on this, would your government have turned down persons who would have applied to become this ambassador's badge through the technical fund? And the link to that, immediately upon change of government, we would have heard of someone from Nigeria claiming that they were appointed by the current prime minister.
Yes.
To the best of your memory and knowledge, can you recall whether or not your cabinet would have made a conclusion to appoint that person and it was not done, so he was caught between transit? What's your knowledge about that
No,
person?
I ask those who are involved because, as you know, most of these things originated through foreign affairs. And of course, we ask before it gets to cabinet, and we check, of course, for the security checks. We check the background, we got information before the cabinet would give approval. We don't, not, in my case as prime minister, I hardly ever knew the individual myself personally. I hardly ever knew them. But we check their background, we check their ability to do what they say they're going to do. And of course, the technical fund, the resources technical fund was satisfied before they appointed. I asked around, and none of the members, the cabinet members that I've asked, could recall the names of that person coming up in the cabinet, because I didn't want to make a statement and say it didn't happen during our time, and to find out it did, because I was not, as I said, not too close to the names specifically of these appointments. And in every case, they've said that they don't know, they have not seen that particular application. They don't know that. So that's what that's my version of what I've learned. What I understood is that the gentleman came and met with the prime minister, and there was seemed to be an understanding. I don't want to go any further because I don't know a lot more than this.
Thank you very much. And my final question for this round. In your opening statement, you mentioned about the person who has been arrested and charged for the death of Mr. Robinson, John T.
Yes.
And you expressed some doubts. Why are you expressing doubts?
Because I do, first of all, I believe...
You have information that we should be aware of.
No, repeat that. Repeat that. Sorry, I intervened a little early.
No, my question was, why are you expressing doubts about that person walking in and saying, I did this crime?
No, first of all, you have to accept the fact that various institutions of the police force has been dismantled since this government came into office, right? And other people have been placed in a position, and the decision appears to be purely political, not in the interest of security of the country. The Commissioner of Police, who was doing a reasonably good job, for one reason or the other, he's out. The FIU, which was identified as one of the best FIU in the region, as identified by regional governments. Most of the professional persons, they were not NNP sympathizers, they were professional persons, were moved. The security apparatus for investigations, a lot of the personnel, many of the police officers, key police officers, are leaving the force in droves. Other people have been brought in purely on the basis of politics. And there is this atmosphere in the police force that is, politics is what prevails in the police force. So how could I trust my life in the hands of persons who are placed based on politics, not on professionalism? And I'm saying, when you have serious concerns of security in the country, when you have incidents of murders taking place, and when you hear someone walks in and say that I kill a man, and you're hearing all kinds of rumors, I'm saying I have no confidence. And I believe I'm justified. And if you go around the country and take a serious poll, you would hear people telling you, they can't fool me with this. So I'm saying, one thing people must know, there is no statute of limitation to murder. So you may duck and hide today, but sometime in the future we'll find out the real truth. I will not be satisfied until an regional international organization comes in and do a serious investigation. When that comes out, and if that person that they held, they come and tell me, yes, we believe that, then I'll believe. Right now, I don't believe. I can't fool myself. One thing you know about me, I can't tell you I believe in something and that I agree with something when I don't believe it. Even if it loses me some votes, I will not say it.
All right. I just wonder if anyone else has any more questions as we get ready to round up. I'm not seeing any hands, so I assume that Dr. Mitchell has been very clear, and we know he's been very articulate and very passionate in speaking here today on these various issues. So, Dr. Mitchell, as I'm not seeing any more questions from the media at this point in time, any closing statements that you'd like to make to the nation in relation to the various issues you've spoken about? You've spoken about the issue in relation to housing, you've spoken about the economic situation, etc. And I know that there's quite a bit of food for thought amongst the Grenadian population right now, those locally, regionally, and internationally. Your closing statement, sir.
Well, all I can say is that this issue of throwing out people out of work, taking contracts from people arbitrarily who has been working and providing good service to the country, is destroying the fabric of our society. It's creating a lot of uneasiness among families in the society. And there is this perception that some people are afraid to talk. I say to you, God give you a right to freedom. The life that you are given, you're born free. Don't let any man, not Keith Mitchell, not any other person, interfere with your right to speak. And they cannot get rid of you from your livelihood. The government in office must serve the entire population. It cannot be those you perceive who vote for you. The others pay taxes. They provide commitment and service to this country. And therefore, you have to respect that and treat everyone as equals. What we're doing in the country right now is dividing the society. And I'm worried about the division in the society. I say, speak out. Let men interfere with you when you speak out. Because there's a bunch of cowards that exist in government. Because if you're not coward, you're not afraid for people to speak. Because people have that right. And I say to you, don't be afraid. Use your right, your fundamental right of freedom. And that's the condition on which I like to close this thing. Don't allow anyone to make you be subservient to any politician, whether in government or opposition.
All right, listeners and viewers, we'd like to thank you for joining us on our monthly press briefing with Leader of His Majesty's Opposition, former Prime Minister and political leader of the New National Party, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell. My name is Sheldon Scott, and on behalf of the technical crew, those of us here locally, those of you tuning in regionally and internationally, the entire family, we'd like to say thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to engaging you next month once again on various and varying issues of national importance. Thank you.
Stay up to date with all that's happening with the New National Party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp on 405-8683 with your name, email, and constituency. Stay in the know with NNP. Get updated.